Hey folks, welcome to Done Some Podcasts. We are here in the same place we were a week ago. We haven't moved. Well, we've moved a little bit.
COVID safe.
COVID safe. We're still not in the same room, which sucks, but we'll live through it, I guess.
I mean, this was recorded as a two-parter. Okay, so let's peel back the veil here.
Yeah, I'm not in day 7 of isolation. I'm in hour 4.
the day before recording the first episode, 5 of my colleagues were diagnosed positive with COVID. So at that rate, every single person I work with is now off work with COVID. So yeah, things are going well over here in Scotland. It was sunny. I'm guessing that by the time this comes out, it's probably not, because that's how things kind of go here.
Yeah, I think we got like our last 4 days of summer, and then it stopped. So I'm sure we had a nice time sitting in our rooms, isolating, looking at the sun outside.
I was outside deliberately trying to get burnt for most of last week, because it's got to get me through the winter. And maybe not so much last week, but certainly spent a fair time recently listening to the very famous band Arctic Monkeys, and you're here for our discussion of the album Humbug. And yes, they are a very, very fucking famous band. If you're only joining us at this juncture, please go back and listen to episode 1, where we acknowledge that at length and try to articulate the fact that we're not here to promote Arctic Monkeys. They don't need the help. Although we're not here to shit on them either. We're pretty ambivalent towards them. In fact, maybe even slightly positive. In the world of pop music, it's nice to have a band that seem like the real deal. And even though I don't love everything they put out, there's a place for it. You don't feel like it's, sending bad messages out to kids and all that kind of shit. So, regardless, they're a big deal.
I'm glad that they are the band that are still going and not the Libertines.
Absolutely.
That's, if anything comes out of this, then that's it.
Yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish our little tour of their back catalogue. We got up to the end of AM, their huge album from 2013. With the first couple albums, Phase 1, much more kind of indie cheeky chappy, high energy. Although full of little hints at what they're going to try and do. Then Phase 2 from 2009-2010 onwards, they had Humbug and Suck It and See, which kind of work well together. Where things sort of slowed down, got a bit more intricate, still quite indie at points, not exactly heavy, but definitely a lot of different ideas coming to the fore. AM was this sort of third phase where, I pointed out that I find it quite surprising that it's such a big album. I don't think it's a bad album by any means, but I do think it's strange that it connected so well, given how slow and how dark it can be at points. But hey, fair enough. And then in 2018 they released an album called Tranquillity Base Hotel and Casino. Jesus in the base bar, filling out the information form. Mama got a head. This is sort of a concept album. All written from the perspective of characters on a moon resort in Tranquillity Base, which is part of the moon.
It's where the moon landing took place in 1969, Tranquillity Base.
Yeah, well, allegedly, as opposed to a soundstage. It's we right at the end of the last episode, Dave made what I think is a key point in the AM. Looks and sounds like a band with a lot of self-confidence and a lot of clout, really pushing through a product that they wanted to make. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of execs, if my finger's on the pulse, which is I think what I'm known for, a lot of execs probably said to them, "Hey guys, could you throw in a kind of jaunty single, maybe I bet you look good in the dance floor," but they sort of were like, "No, we're going to do it the way we want to do it." And I think that's a luxury you're afforded when you have a reasonable amount of clout, and also working with a label like Domino who were behind them and independent and stuff like that. Tranquillity Base Hotel and Casino is that tenfold to me.
Slowly dropped your eyelids. When true love takes a grip, it leaves you without a choice.
I think a decision like this album maybe seems inevitable in hindsight, but given the profile of the band, but it would take a fairly brave label executive to tell the Arctic Monkeys no at this point. Tell Alex Turner no at this point, because the guy himself has kind of transitioned into being a brand. You know, this is when he was, dating Alexa Chung, or this, I think it's maybe slightly after he was dating Alexa Chung, living in New York City. You know, the guy was hot shit at this point.
He's the Bohemian King of Sheffield.
There you go.
Lord of Brooklyn. Baron of Shoreditch.
So yeah, concept album written largely by Turner on piano, I believe, in his sort of Brooklyn apartment, or
LA.
his LA apartment.
He'd moved to LA by this point, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was in New York. Well, okay. It's a big stylistic departure. As much as I have a lot of time for the band, I can't really go with them on that departure. I think the album has some okay moments, but is largely pretty dull and a bit self-indulgent.
Not in a million years that I need so many Lolas. Can I please have my money back? My virtual reality mask is stuck.
This is where I personally wonder if they have asked too much of their audience. Originally, I kind of felt, as I've mentioned, that I thought, maybe AM is that point, but it seems like the audience, it definitely seems like the audience went with them on AM, given
Absolutely.
its enormous success. This one I'm not so sure of. I feel like they may have slightly jumped the shark, and I actually don't even think it's for like huge creative rewards as you may have had with the likes of Radiohead, who, by the way, are Arctic Monkeys' nemesis. Fucking hate the Arctic Monkeys, Tom York especially. Dave, you called them in the last episode, the Arctic Monkeys, you called them a working class Radiohead.
Yes.
Yeah. This album, I think, doesn't necessarily have the creative rewards that Radiohead got with the likes of OK Computer and even on into Kid A and stuff. I think it's okay. I don't think anybody's really hailed it as being this giant musical accomplishment. And the sales figures, whilst the band are still famous, and so the sales figures are decent, aren't mind-blowing. I think
I just want to say Pitchfork gave it 8.1 out of 10 and Q gave it 5 out of 5. So
yeah, but
I mean, the crux, the fulcrum of those two publications actually coming together in the same thing is it's pretty unlikely.
With sales figures, we spoke about it in the last episode. This was the biggest selling vinyl of the last 20, certainly this millennium, like the last 25 years, I think it was. I actually think that there's something in that. Given that the vinyl sales have been astronomical, but the streams are sort of a fraction.
Yeah, it's not a singles record. It's not like songs on here are not going on teenage girls' workout playlists,
exactly,
or on wedding dance floor favourites for slightly indie couples. But folk who have bought a record player will definitely buy this because they go, oh yeah, no, this is the album. I need to, I need to listen to an album, so I better get the new Arctic Monkeys record because it's an album. And I've got so many plants from IKEA as well. I got 42 plants. I got some coffee table books, and I think I got a stovetop coffee maker.
Well, that's it. I think what that shows is they may be connecting to a different audience here. Like they may be, a smaller, more specialised one, and I think that could have like real implications for their status and relevance in the next few years. Because it'll be interesting to see if they backpedal for this, or if that combination of self-confidence and clout takes them onwards further into this territory.
Or do they just try something totally different?
Yeah, or do they take a left turn yet? Because I just don't see the majority of kids trying to girls that want to get on their boyfriend's shoulders with glittery cheeks and folk drinking alcopops at Transmit buying into this going forward.
What I think is interesting is, see, for the first 4 records, I think they grew as their audience grew.
Yeah, I was going to say that, yeah.
And I think like by the time you get to Suck It and See, they are slightly more mature, and it's like, oh, but so are our listeners. They've been listening to us for 5 years and they've come on this journey with us. Then with the AM, they come out with these big pop hits and they suddenly gain brand new 20-year-old, like all their old listeners are now hitting 30, but they get a whole load of, 18, 19, 20-year-olds coming in on AM. But then all of a sudden here, they're like, oh, let's do a record for all the 35-year-old fans that we have now.
Yeah, that is kind of what it feels like. It feels like they fell in love with David Bowie as well. The thing is, in the live sets, and just having watched them live not so long ago, you can take it if it's interspersed with the likes that I bet that you look good in the dance floor. You can take it live because it's got that, but as they go further into this territory and the ratio starts to change, where more of the songs come from this era and less of the songs come from the older era, the bouncy, catchy, hooky ones that people want to sing along with, I think they may hit a bit of a wall. On this record, the title track does have a lot of Josh Homme still lingering about. It's got a lot of David Bowie.
I've been on a bender, back to that prophetic esplanade, where I ponder all the questions, but just manage.
It's got maybe a hybrid between the two, and maybe even hints at a guy called Chris Goss, who worked with Josh Homme a lot, and he was part of the Masters of Reality and stuff. It's decent. It's sort of noirish, but honestly, I think their label has quite possibly lost the upper hand to an extent here, given the clout of the band, and they might be looking at this and thinking, what festival crowd is going to give a fuck about this tune? Because I don't see it at all.
But I feel like they can play the South Bank Centre and charge £100 a ticket.
Absolutely.
Like that's what they've moved to.
Yeah, Nick Cave territory. Yeah. The sixth track on it, 4 out of 5, I think is probably one of the standout tunes on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Lovely look, you could meet someone you like, during the meat of your strike. It is that easy. Lunar surface on a Saturday night, dressed up in silver and white with coloured old grey whistle.
It's a stick-on 70s period Bowie tune though. That's what it is. And
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
It further illustrates that the target market, certainly for this album, and maybe how Alex Turner sees himself, is changing.
It's the Exodus, it's all getting gentrified. I put a taqueria on the roof, it was well reviewed, 4 stars out of 5. And that's
I kind of feel as well though, like maybe he's getting a little bit ahead of himself. Okay, they've been about for a while, but they're still relatively young guys, and if you go too far down this Q magazine route too soon, it kind of becomes a bit of a creative dead end. You kind of write yourself out of relevance, and then it just takes some other band to fucking take your place pretty easily.
He said that he was listening to a lot of Serge Gainsbourg, Leonard Cohen, Francois Robles.
It's interesting you mentioned Q, because like the reviewer for that described it as strange and wonderful, but one that almost feels like Arctic Monkeys have embarked on their own full band side project. And that is kind of what it sounds like. It's like, oh, this is a creative avenue that we could explore. And yeah, fair enough, like one of them or a couple of them could have done this as a side project, and it would, no great shakes. It would have been like, all right, that's fine. But like what they've done is they've put their full fucking weight
brand
and their name and their brand behind it, and it's like, oh, that's a really strange turn for everybody. I don't know.
It's going to be interesting to see if they've overplayed their hand on it, and how they deal with that. Do they backtrack a bit, or do they just fucking plough onwards? I mean, given that I do think they seem like quite a brave band, they may just choose to fucking just like batter on with it, and I think those festival crowds will change quickly as a result of that. You know, they don't care about Serge Gainsbourg and Leonard Cohen. They don't give a fuck about that. It's kind of fickle, but they don't. So yeah, but the album we're here to discuss, let's cycle back 8 years to 2010 and talk about Humbug, which I have a fair bit to say about. So they've just finished their sort of sojourn into Last Shadow Puppets, which, as we mentioned, sort of slowed things down, and I think gave Alex Turner a sense of cool, a little bit more sex appeal, and like maybe a bit more of a sense of identity and wanting to plough his own furrow. On this album, it is very well known that they collaborated with Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age. I think that was a really interesting decision. I think it's a decision that worked really well. Not all of the tracks by Josh Homme. James Ford, the guy who had worked on the previous album and would go on to work on Suck It and See, produced 4 of the songs, including 2 singles. The first track, My Propeller, Secret Door, Cornerstone, and a bonus track which I can't remember what edition it was on, but I Haven't Got My Strange. They were his works. This album was also tellingly released in some formats with a studio cover of Red Right Hand.
Red right hand.
Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds tune, which again shows a slight. It's an interesting choice if you're looking at where this band are going and how they see themselves. That's an interesting one. But more than half of the album was recorded at Rancho de la Luna with Josh Homme. That's where Queens of Stone Age recorded their debut album for Queens of Stone Age fans. The Josh Homme influence in this album is just massive. There's no getting away from that. How much exactly he contributed is kind of hard to tell. The songs would mostly have been written in advance. Yes, the band was listening to a lot of Cream, Hendrix, Black Sabbath at this period, anecdotally. Were the songs maybe composed with their intent to go and record with Josh Homme in mind? Did Josh Homme play an active part in slowing songs down, maybe dropping the vocal down the register? Is it just a coincidence? I would say that's probably the least likely. I think there seems to be a bit of a Wikipedia war about this, because if you look at the Wikipedia for this, the track list is credited solely to Alex Turner, and it also says Alex Turner wrote the whole album, and then in the literal sentence in the edit after it, it says co-written by Josh Homme.
Did you see the source on that? That was a Pitchfork article saying they've been working with them, but that was it. It doesn't actually say co-written the album.
But the thing is, what I thought was quite interesting was that they spent 10 days on pre-production of this album with Josh Homme in LA before they went to Rancho de la Luna. That's possibly where that kind of blurry, period of like that 10 days of pre-production in my experience probably usually involves a fair amount of writing. Changing
things that come out, things that go beyond just the production and the sound of the record. Are things like the wee guitar solos or the little ooh, 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 that are very Josh Homme.
The key as well, like the key
don't they're not necessarily vital parts to the melody. They like you're not getting royalties off them, but I mean they are very Josh Homme and like they are huge fingerprints. Decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Arctic Monkeys had actually originally met Josh Homme after they supported Queens of the Stone Age in Houston in 2007. On this album, Alan Johannes was also an engineer, which I will say I think also plays a part in those guitar tones that start to appear. Some Queens of the Stone Age and Josh Homme in general, but all the projects he's been involved with have had very idiosyncratic guitar tones where he's really extreme EQs in them, sometimes very MIDI, and you know, they almost sound like synths, or I mean sometimes they sound like brass. They're so heavily altered. The vocals in this record are less yelped and barked, and sort of there's less indie blur to it. It's much cooler, which again is a lot more sort of typically Josh Homme. It also does feature some co-writing. Alison Mosshart of The Kills does vocals in one track and co-wrote it. In terms of the reception, it was number 15 in the USA. It was the lowest charting album there. It was number 1 in the UK, Belgium and Ireland, number 2 in Australia, and number 3 in Japan, which I think is quite an interesting stat. This is also when P. Diddy became an outspoken fan of the band. We mentioned that Alex had, you know, been living in NYC with Alexa Chung, so there's a lot of like rock star patter sort of taking shape. Alex Turner's spoken about the sort of mixed reaction that the album got, which obviously we'll dissect a bit, but he said you can't spend all your time worrying about them people who are like, I'm not into this long-haired bollocks. Fair enough. A writer called Steve Erlewine at AllMusic noted, and I think quite astutely, that the record wasn't as accessible as the two precursors, but, quote, may mean more in the long term than it does on its own. And I'm totally behind that statement. That's basically why I'm bringing it to the table. I think the significance of this record is seen in where the band have ended up, and especially in the likes of AM, more so than it is just in isolation. In an NME article, a guy called Mike Williams wrote, if Arctic Monkeys had never walked into the desert with Josh Homme to record Humbug, they would never have made AM. Humbug was as much about subverting people's impressions of who the band were as it was an album in its own right. Again, really behind them in that comment. Recently, NME and Consequences of Sound have both called this the band's weakest album, but by contrast, the likes of The Independent said it was their best. I think it is without doubt their most polarising. Apparently, on the initial broadcast, so I think it was like July 2009, BBC Radio 1 aired Crying Lightning, the sort of first cut from the album to hit people's ears, in inverted commas leaked, but obviously deliberately.
Crying lightning, and how you like to aggravate the ice cream man on rainy afternoons.
And the reception was just a little bit confused. It's the best way I've seen it described. Like the audience were sort of like excited to hear it, but also like, this is not what we expected. We're not exactly negative about it, but very unsure of, you know, it was the next year that the album came out, but very unsure of what they were going to get. They headlined Reading and Leeds just a few days after the album came out, and I think at that point they kind of set in motion a transition from indie upstarts to rock stars, and they did a live cover of that Reading and Leeds back to back of Red Right Hand, and I think that alone shows their intent and probably really confused some of that indie audience. I don't know if you guys were even really particularly aware of them at this point, but what are your impressions of the album? What are your impressions of it sitting in their canon?
Well, I mean, I guess we'll talk track by track, and then I'll give you my overall score. I think it is a real sonic development. I think it is very interesting seeing the band grow and become much more of a studio rock band than a live indie band. It's easy to have a hangover from being cultural, like sort of flash in the pans like they were, or, you know, like being just really fucking hot shit with a massive, you know, single. That would just kill a lot of bands. And sometimes you're just like, oh, do you know what? You've done one or two records that are really sharp and really vital. You don't need to do anything more. And I think if they just left it after 2 records, they would have a pretty solid reputation. And, you know, they'd have been able to go off and do, you know, solo stuff or whatever. It's really interesting hearing the band develop, and you see other bands of their type, like, I don't know, The Killers or Kings of Leon, or even like previous, it was like Oasis and Blur, and it's that third record, or it's that album that they decide to grow, and like sometimes they just get bogged down and stuck, and this was a band that sounded like they were just totally finding confidence to then go off and just do whatever the fuck they wanted. And I'm not necessarily sold that it's the most enjoyable album, but it's certainly an important one for them. I
admire the decision to take a left turn, and I also actually have to say I admire the public's and their fans' decision to go on this journey with them, which they no doubt have, even to this day.
Can I just jump in and say, I think that's actually the crux of what I'm saying about AM as well. I'm impressed that people rose to the challenge of that. I think they didn't underestimate their audience, and they were rewarded for it. And it surprises me, because like, I'm fucking cynical, you know. I'm like, people aren't going to be into that, and they were. So good for them. They probably kicked open the doors for all this stuff like Idols and stuff like that to break through as well, because it surprises me that the likes of Idols can become as big as they've gotten. And I think that's because minds were opened by the likes of AM.
Yeah, and I think that journey begins on this record. Like Dave said, they had 2 albums which they could have just walked away, went, I'm done, or just continued doing the same shit. They could have done that for forever. But I admire the decision to do this record. I admire the decision to do it with Josh Homme, mostly. I think that was clever, and he couldn't have called that at all, right? You would never have seen that happening. I think that's pretty cool too. I agree with Dave. I don't necessarily think it's the most enjoyable record. I don't actually think they're the most enjoyable band, period. But there's a lot to like on this album for sure.
I would say, like, so you look at other English or British indie bands, like, kind of per decade. So, you know, you've got the Beatles and the Kinks to begin with, but then in the 80s you've got the likes of Joy Division and the Smiths. Then in the 90s you've got Oasis and Blur, and then 2000s it's kind of, you know, Libertines and
the Arctic Monkeys.
Oasis, their third record, you know, they'd released a working class anthemic album, and then they kind of a bloated follow-up, but it, you know, it still had the fucking songwriting chops, you know, to capture the imagination of the British working class. And then they released Be Here Now, and I mean, that was just a cocaine-fueled dirge trying to be the biggest band in the world, but they weren't good enough musicians, and they didn't test themselves sonically. They just took loads of cocaine and tried to rip off the Beatles.
Sold alright though, eh?
Well, in the first week, and then everybody realised how fucking pish it was. Whereas this album didn't sell nearly as much as Be Here Now. But I mean, it fucking cemented Arctic Monkeys as a much better band historically than Oasis, I think.
Yeah, well, I think Oasis's decision with the third album really pigeonholed them. That was their sound. They were going to find it really, really hard.
We're going to be Oasis, but more Oasis.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas Arctic Monkeys went, we're just going to fucking try some new shit.
Yeah, it's that point where you decide, do we want to do what we do to its maximum capacity, or do we want to take a chance but open up the possibilities? And it's 2 quite different decisions. I mean, I'd Be Here Now is a fucking huge album. You know, it's totemic, man. I mean,
stand by me, nobody knows the way it's gotta be. Yeah, no, that album's fucking terrible.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that was the big one, and All Around the World and Don't Go Away.
Will we dive into the tunes in this one?
Hang on a second. Hang on. I just want to come back to this Be Here Now thing. That's been certified 7 times platinum in the UK, and the first Arctic Monkeys album's been certified 6 times platinum, which is not a kick in the arse off when you think about numbers.
Is the platinum certification the same as it used to be?
300, I think. 300,000 in the UK.
Mm-hmm. I wondered if they'd lowered the bar when people just stopped giving a fuck.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, who actually buys records?
So I mean, let's be honest, we're absolutely not going to escape Queens of the Stone Age references here, so I might as well just dispense any pretense there. The opening track, My Propeller.
You've got to make your descent slowly and oil up those sticky keys.
Not actually produced by Josh Homme, controversially, but I think even with this tune, if you just, from the first 5 seconds, if you jump between this and their other stuff, sonically, it definitely feels really different. The vocal that Alex brings in really early on has Josh Homme written all over it. That register, the cool, the slur, the tempo of it, the pacing. It's a really understated opener, I think. It's a song that takes a while to get into its stride.
Coax me out my road and have a spin of my propeller.
It utilises this kind of device of having a kind of anti-chorus, sort of kids on it's going to do a chorus and drops off, and the real hook in the song is the end refrain that comes in about 2 minutes 15.
My propeller won't spin and I can't get it started on my own. When are you arriving? My propeller.
And it sort of cycles around itself until the end, I guess, maybe a wee bit like a propeller, which sort of makes sense. By the way, he maintains this isn't about his dick. I had not even considered that until I started reading about it, and that whole patter about my propeller won't spin and I can get it started on my own. When are you arriving? He's adamant. He's like, I would never sing a song about not being able to get a hard on. So, all right. The end part of this, the end refrain, is such a fucking good vocal line. I love the drum drops that are at the end of every. I think it's basically every line for that end part. I think that itself is a bit of a hook. You can kind of eardrum along with this song, and also just the guitar tones. That Johannes Josh Homme thing shines through in it, even though it's not produced by him. I think the influence is quite apparent.
Yeah, I think the melody's kind of good in it. It gives me a big 60s feel with the backing vocals, and it's got a really big
huge 60s vibe.
Yeah, really big surf vibe as well. Guitars sound a bit like is it the Shadows in places?
Yeah, you're right. It does. It has a lot of that. Yeah.
I think the main thing that just strikes you straight away is just the amount of space that's in there.
The whole album's got that, hasn't it? The whole album's got so much space in it.
Yeah, like so much room, and it's got a bit of groove. It's slowed down. You've got American guitar tones and chords and chord progressions. You got the piano. The production is really nice. It's quite warm. I would say, and I think this is going to be a slight theme throughout. Just the guitar riff itself is a little bit monotonous, a little bit ploddy for me. I just feel that throughout the record, the riffs themselves are a little bit safe, but production-wise, it's great. And it is a good song, and I like the structure.
You know, it's probably a fair criticism. I think as much as they sound a bit like Queens of the Stone Age, they don't have that pure panache for a riff that Queens of the Stone Age have, because, I mean, that's a furrow they've been ploughing just incessantly and honing. And Arctic Monkeys are relatively new to this sound. So, yeah, I mean,
they got some really fucking good, sharp indie riffs on the first two records.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's a totally different ballgame to try and then write a groovy rock riff or, a classic rock riff.
And a prime example is Crying Lightning, the second tune, which has that stompy Queens of Stone Age thing. It's a bit stodgy, but in a kind of deliberate way.
Yeah, big fat bass.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily the best line. You know, it's more about style than content. I think it's really interesting talking about the big fat bass. Josh Homme is quoted as having used a lot of weird images to try and describe the sound he's going for. I really relate to this, by the way, when I'm in the studio. The fucking king of an analogy or a metaphor. One of them was, and I think it might even have been this song, I want the bass to sound like a fat kid with chocolate on his face. And it kind of does. That kind of makes sense. Crying Lightning is actually quite a lean song, as much as it's quite full sounding. But I mean, by a minute 20 into the song, it's already tearing through the second verse, and it's already stepped up as well. I think by the second chorus, the energy in it really jumps up. He's gone up a register vocally. That hook really jumps out. I think the backing vocals in this are really, really well written. And, 2 minutes 30 in this song is just, the solo is just absurdly Queens of Stone Age. I mean, it could literally have been copied and pasted off a Queens of Stone Age session in approach and tone. But it's great. It works really fucking well.
I feel, once again, I just think, it's the slightly plodding riff on this that is what takes it down, or doesn't allow me to get into it like a rock song that I might like normally. It feels to me very much like, Status Quo. I was it doesn't necessarily sound like them, but I saw.
Not a bad band in their day, by the way. Early Status Quo.
No, totally. No, but I on BBC4 the other night, I saw really, really, really fucking early Status Quo on like black and white TV, 1968 or something, and they're playing like sort of folky, I've just learned how to play my Gretsch, and they've all got they're all about 14 years old, and they've got funny little haircuts and everything. And this reminded me of that. It sounds like his guitar, he's just like looking at the camera nervously because they're not used to playing on stage because it's 1964 and mum's watching, and it sounds a little bit nervous to me. I don't know why.
Maybe because they're playing in front of Josh Homme.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that would make me nervous.
I think it's got a real vaudeville feel. That druggy guitar effect that Josh Homme uses all the time is all over this song, like you said, Chris.
Yep.
And the backing vocals really add that carnivalesque atmosphere to it. I really like the organ. There's an organ before the end, like in the final outro of the song, which really
is
lifts
it an organ?
again.
I thought it was brass. Listening to it, I actually thought it might have been like a kind of saxophone or something. Like, it was some kind of like weird tone that was in there. And originally, I'd always thought it was guitar. And the closer I listened, I was like, I don't know if that is a guitar.
There's only keys on the album, apart from guitars and stuff. So
maybe it's just a tone that they've gone for that's meant to emulate that. But yeah, I mean, I know the one you mean, and it's effective, fills it up a space, in the palette really well. Third song, Dangerous Animals. I mean, it is, at this point, a little bit funny how much of a Queens of Stone Age album it is. I mean, it doesn't stay here, but this song...
Yeah, these first three records.
Yeah, it does not.
First three songs.
Yeah. Is it Josh singing the intro to this tune? It sounds like it.
Josh isn't on this record at all. We ordered production. He doesn't. They're just trying. At all.
They're just trying to sound like him.
Seriously, like that. Down by the dawn. That really sounds like Josh Homme, man. I would be amazed if that wasn't just him chipping in and not saying it. Like
it's probably somebody else. It's probably Matt or Nick, because obviously they do a lot of really different backing vocals throughout the album that are definitely sound like something that.
Yeah, it's certainly deliberate if it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually think that this song has a lot of their earlier albums in it. I think it's less snappy, it's a bit slower, but there is a consistency with some of the early records. There's a kind of cheekier thing in that, the lyrical approach of spelling out the words and things like that. I think it does call back, albeit the choruses, yes, are much darker, much heavier.
It's funny on this, I think in my 34 years of listening to music, a riff will normally grab me and then I discover the song from the riff. Whereas on this record and on this song, the riff puts me off because it's fucking ploddy and annoying and basic, and then they win me back because the actual rest of the song is actually very nicely built, and I like the chorus and I like the production. Yep. But yeah, there's so many songs out there where I like the riff but the song doesn't live up to it, whereas this song far outweighs the quality of the riff.
Yeah, it's the inverse. I kind of agree with that. I think this does feel like a little bit of a Queen's cast-off. You can imagine them having this on an early B-side or something like that. It's not massively inspiring, but they do a lot with the rest of the song and the arrangement and the hooks in it. And that, like I said, they feel like newbies in this territory. You can tell that they're less sophisticated at writing these kind of riffs than the likes of Josh Homme and all those guys, because they've not been doing it as long. But they bring something new to the mix.
It's actually in this song that the recurring theme of the record that annoyed me appears, and it's a marching drums, which they overuse like absolute fuck throughout the entire record. It's broken up with maracas, I think it's maracas in this song, which is pretty cool. Gives it a really adds to that carnival feel. It definitely it's some kind of weird percussion that sounds like maracas to me, and it's got that weird scooped fuzz sound in the middle eight, which like Homme uses a lot, which I really dig as well. When I heard the drums and I read some reviews, and a few people mentioned how they use marching drums all the time, I just couldn't unhear it whenever I listened to it.
The fourth track, Secret Door, is one of the James Ford tracks, and I think it does have a distinctly more British sound to it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It goes a bit desert rock, but it's got a sort of dreamier, softer edge, and it blisses out. And I think this is one of the kind of more John Lennon-esque songs towards the end.
Sure. Absolutely, yeah, Beatles all over it, man.
Contemporised Beatles finale. It's good. It doesn't set me on fire, but I think it's a good pacer.
I like his lyrics on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the lyrics are pretty solid throughout. Mm-hmm. Potion Approaching, fifth track.
I was biting the time zone, and we embellished the banks of our bloodstreams, and threw caution to the colourful. I am fell asleep.
That's a Nirvana riff, isn't it?
Yeah. So a lot of people have pointed out the fact that this is a lot like the track Very Ape from In Utero.
Yeah.
It is absolutely, stylistically, a good break to what's been a series of slightly mulchier kind of desert tempos that preceding it. But I think given that inescapable comparison to what is, let's be honest, a superior Nirvana tune, it's kind of hard to forgive it. It's not a bad song, but it is burdened by the sheer overwhelming sense of familiarity.
It's just three notes basically. It's just like da da, and then you're like, oh yeah, no, that's another song. Sorry.
Yeah, but it's not even. It's not even just that riff. It's the fact that they go da da, but then they go up a register and start going, which is the thing that Nirvana did on Very Ape. It's a pity, I think it needed something like that, but I'm just not sure that riff. They could
have just tried. Another chord.
Yeah, just go da.
Yeah.
Go backwards.
Hang on, can I just say in Potion Approaching, see when they bring it down to just the drums and the hand claps and the woo-woos, that's pure Queens of the Stone Age, man.
Oh, yeah, like, and the halftime chuggy ending as well.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
Like, it starts as Nirvana and then finishes even more Queens of the Stone Age than they've been yet.
The sixth track, Fire and the Thud. Just being honest, it's the most understated and potentially the most disposable song on the record for me. That might be because, spoiler alert, it precedes a song that a lot of folks, myself included, anticipate greatly. Subtle. It's actually a really good example of the genre, that kind of trippy desert rock with the kind of wee hints of Chris Isaac, even, Chris Isaac. I mean, it's got a kind of noirish crooner quality.
Yeah.
It's delivered in a kind of lower register. It's dripping with sort of attempts at sex appeal. In the context of the unsung credentials of this album, the play rate on this song is 1.3% of the play rate of Do I Wanna Know, even though it's 3 years older than it. So, I mean, this is substantially less recognised by their fan base, let alone the public. But I do think it's slightly overshadowed by what follows it.
Yeah, I mean, I find the main vocal really hypnotising on this song. And I like the mix of it. I like where the bass sits in the mix, brings right in the centre, and the guitars are really panned, like really quite far out to the right and left, which is cool. It's got a really unsettling psychedelic vibe, and the backing vocals throughout are just pure Beatles. Like it's a Beatles harmony all fucking day
so
long,
Beatles. But I like the way that it builds and then it falls apart. I like the structure of this.
So what this is all about at this point is Cornerstone, the 7th track in it.
I thought I saw you in the battleship, but it was only a look-alike. She was nothing but a vision trick. Under the warning light, she was close.
It's not a Josh track. For me, it is debatably this band's lyrical peak of that kind of Cooper Clarke approach. It's like EastEnders set to like a cracking kind of indie ballad. I think it combines whimsy, romanticism. Puff Daddy agrees, by the way. Puff Daddy is there's like a clip of him that went viral at the time of him right down the front at a big Arctic Monkeys show for this tune because he loved it so much. I think the combination in this song of relatability and kind of the careful, unfussy arrangement gives it just this massive longevity. It's succinct, it's brilliantly considered. It's got, I mean, when I listen to it, it's got little hints of like everything from Weezer to the Coral.
And I elongated my lift home. Yeah, I let him go the long way round. I smelt your scent on the seatbelt.
There's loads of like really good indie pop comparisons that can be made to it. I think it's just a fucking tremendous bit of unpretentious indie writing. A bit like I said about Piledriver Waltz on the album that followed it. I love that to it. I think it's breezy, it's light, it's totally refreshing. It's like a fucking sorbet in the album.
I saw your sister in the cornerstone on the phone to the middleman. When I saw that she was on her own, I thought she might understand. She was close, well you couldn't get much closer. She said I'm really not supposed to.
I've listened to it a lot and I still fucking love it.
It's super 60s, man. See when the organ comes in about 1 minute 43, it could easily sit in Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, like without a shadow of a doubt, man. And see they do the backwards tracking effect, that totally doubles down on that Beatles vibe, man. It sounds almost as like an effect used on Within You Without You, which is on Sgt. Pepper's. I think it's a really good touchstone back to that particular album, that particular period of the Beatles, I think. And I like it for that feeling alone, really.
I feel like on the record it feels like the first 6 tracks they are tourists trying things out, and then this is them coming back to being like, oh, this is who we are, this is what we do, we know this. And it totally works.
Slightly more known territory, yeah, I'll give you that. And it's nice because it provides a little ingredient of familiarity for the audience they're trying to take with them, and it's probably key in that as well, this song. The track that comes after it, Dance Little Liar, this is an interesting song for me because it's one that I sort of dismissed years ago and kind of skipped past, and then the more I listened to it, the more it was a real grower.
I heard the truth was built to bend, a mechanism to suspend. The guilt is what you were acquiring.
It is at first glance quite murky and maybe a bit pedestrian, but there is, in the first couple of minutes, this kind of creepy, alluring little chorus hook that is very understated to begin with, but sets the scene for a really strong ending. It maybe plays things a little bit too subtle for its own good, I'll agree to that. But it explodes into this really big guitar riff about 3:15, which I think is a really effective part.
Yeah, good riff.
Yep, and then it sees that through to the latter part of the tune. It just brings back that hook that they kind of whispered earlier on, and I think it's actually a really, really strong bit of writing. The problem is that unfortunately a lot of people, including me for a long time, may have checked out of the tune by that point. It takes a little bit of work. But I do think so. It's a good example of how the band were not writing for commercial viability. They were writing to their own tastes. They were writing to stuff that they thought was artistically strong. And this is one of the tunes that, the longer I've been into this, it's become one of the highlights.
I really like the vocal production on this. They feel really MIDI, almost distorted as well, which is cool. Great backing vocals too, which are really buried and quite understated. I love the guitar solo section. I mean, the guitars sound totally lush, man. There's a lead guitar which is really reverby and dirty, while the rhythm is full of like slapback echo. I think it's really hard to get slapback echo correct on any guitar sound, right? I think it's a great idea, but getting it right and getting it to sound good, I think, can be quite difficult. But they totally crack it on this for sure, man. Loads of layers of guitar at the end as well. Not quite as much as the last song, but there's loads.
Yeah. Track 9, Pretty Visitors. The opening organ in that really reminds me of a band called Murder City Devils. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it.
I've heard of them,
Yeah. But then it very quickly pops into something that I think stylistically sounds as close to their first record as they have in...
Yeah, this is old school. It's fast, it's energetic. Fucking great drums, to be fair.
Struggle to move round in your muddy mind. Blatantly caked and unwilling to wind. No cooperative time, so we sit on the springs till the mud goes dry.
Yeah, totally up front that, got that as well.
Matt's drum is brilliant. I mean, I really like the energy. I think the album really needed it at this point. Honestly, the chorus hook doesn't really do a lot for me. I'm not a big fan of the melodic writing in it.
The pretty visitors came and waved their arms and cast the shadow of a snake bit on the wall. All the pretty visitors came.
I mean, I like where they're coming from. I just don't think they necessarily got all the way there. I wish they'd taken a wee bit of time to maybe create something a little bit sweeter and a little bit catchier with that chorus. I think the bridge goes to a nice big stompy place. That's really fucking good, and unsurprisingly invites Queens of Stone Age comparisons.
The keys and the guitars being really up front and with the vocal and the backing vocal is really, really cool. And see when they bring it to slow it down and bring the organ back in to the front and centre, it's really sinister. See that outro at the end, man. See if these guys weren't an indie band, that'd be heavy as fuck. But obviously they are an indie band, so it's not heavy as fuck.
All the pretty visitors came and waved their arms and cast the shadow.
This song was almost a single before My Propeller.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then I ended up going with My Propeller.
But I can see why they didn't choose this, because although it would be a good single, it's not necessarily of this record. It sounds much more like the previous two records.
It's true.
Yeah. Misleading. And then track 10, love a 10-track album.
Fiendish wonder in the carnival's wake. Dull caresses once again irritate.
The Jeweler's
Done in
Hands.
40 minutes.
Yep, under 40 minutes, yeah. To me, if this record had been bookended by another tune with as big a hook as My Propeller, I think it would overall have a stronger reputation than it does now. This song is fine, but I think the album kind of shrugs its way out. For example, I would have happily seen it swapped with Dance Little Liar, and Dance Little Liar become the last tune, because I feel you almost want to see the last tune through to the end and see how they finish, and I think then that would have shone more of a light on that big ending of that tune.
What they've done is they've done the rock final track and gone, let's go a bit slower, a bit bigger, build it up.
And you're a sinking stone, but you know what it's like to hold the jeweler's hands. That procession of pioneers.
Rather than the indie final track, which is like, let's finish on a big fucking hitter, like on a catchy guy.
it's a slightly disappointing conclusion for me, even as a fan.
Yeah, because
of the
I don't think it's big or rocky enough to be a big rocky finisher.
It just misses the target, and I do think that contributes a little bit to the sense of the album having a sort of, Mark, what's that phrase for 3 full stops in a row?
Ellipsis.
And it's got like a little bit of that to me. It doesn't have a nice.
Although in many ways that does kind of work, because it tees Suck It and See up as a follow-up record, actually, and it comes up quickly, and Suck It and See builds on a lot of these themes, and they are kind of partner albums to me.
I mean, like, just in the context of this album, I think the length is perfectly judged. As we said, 10 tracks, just under 40 minutes. The vibe's challenging for the uninitiated. I mean, albeit, I know that a lot of the people that listen to this podcast maybe take that stuff for granted. Bear in mind that the indie kids that Arctic Monkeys were playing to and were seen to be catering for found this kind of tough tune. You know, it was a challenge, but I think that was bold. I think it was creative. I think it maybe wears its Josh Homme influences a little bit too, apparently. But the flavours that he brought out in them, which seem to have been lurking there, they tend to complement them. And I think they served them well going forward, especially as AM illustrates. I think as indie bands go, these guys had the opportunity to be complacent with this record and waved it away. And even if it doesn't set you on fire, I think it deserves credit. I think it maybe provides a wee glimmer of hope that kind of all-consuming beast of commercial success, you know, despite the best efforts of the industry that's built up around it, doesn't necessarily extinguish every creative instinct and interesting thought artists have. My closing arguments on the band before I pass over to you guys. I think we as a podcast, and we just people in general, need to pick our battles. I don't think Arctic Monkeys, no matter whether they're your favourite band or far from it, are the thing that we should be directing or scoring at necessarily. I don't fucking listen to them very often, but I think where they're coming from is pretty sincere, and I think they're definitely encouraging to a lot of young musicians. They're ultimately a real band. I mean, in amongst their fan base, you've got a big mix. You've got people that are fucking really passionate about music, and you get folk that just want to jump on their fucking boyfriend's shoulders and get pure mad with it. And fuck it, that's fine. If it's these guys soundtracking that, I'd rather it was them. Young musicians watching them with enthusiasm, see something that's far more attainable than the likes of WAP or whatever the fuck it is. Even the Killers, I don't think the Killers are anywhere near as organic or attainable an end goal as the likes of Arctic Monkeys. I mean, fair play as well. You know, they're not conventionally handsome. I mean, Alex Turner has got insane sex appeal now, but he's sort of earned it. You know, I think by virtue of just being an actual rock star, inverted commas. You know, I think he got there through hard work. Yeah, okay, that's maybe idolatry, but if nothing else, it's a healthy body image. You know, it's a normal looking guy that just fucking made the most of his skills and has been put on a pedestal by, you know, as a result of his talents. Those are reasonably healthy messages. I think, obviously, as I say, they've shown at a few junctures now in their career a willingness to take commercial risks. They haven't always worked, as with the last album. They definitely don't need the coverage. They definitely didn't need a double episode of this podcast, but it's only fair to acknowledge these things. And I think that this album, given that it was one of the biggest deviations and didn't land particularly well, really merits discussion under that heading. And as I said way back at the start of part 1, I just hope that we as a podcast can use it to demonstrate that we don't just shit in success, and that I personally, Chris, don't just shit in success, because after the Biffy Clyro episode we got a fair bit of that. He just doesn't like them because they did well. Well, yes, that is true about Biffy Clyro, but it's not true about Arctic Monkeys.
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting talking about them. It's interesting talking about really big bands, because we don't often actually talk about bands that are so publicly known and like deliberately go out there to write big fucking songs for everybody. And yeah, I guess we talked about it at the beginning of last week's episode. I've never had any ill will towards them. I've always sort of recognised that they are legitimate. I thought they were sort of clever or funnier, more musically talented than the fucking Kooks or the Libertines and all that pish that came out.
Kaiser Chiefs.
Yeah, exactly. And as I say, it's interesting that a band can come out and be a sort of provincial internet hit, working class, and sort of speak for a lot of people and really get the zeitgeist like their first record did, and then be able to creatively grow and artistically grow whilst not selling out. I say all that, and I feel like this is a band who are they're basically now just a national treasure, can't be argued with anymore. This album is a very important turning point, turning them from a working class sort of flash in the pan to a bona fide UK stadium rock band, up there forever and allowed to do what they want to do, try their arm in America, sell lots of records. It is interesting. However, and it is a solid record, but I just don't find it quite interesting enough for me, because it's not rock enough to be really rocky, and then it's not indie enough to be, sharp and caustic. So I appreciate where it stands in their development as a band, and I think it is interesting, but I don't think it's their best record, and I think their best records are their biggest records. So I don't think they are unsung. I guess this is an unsung record, but also it's not that good. Well, no, it is good, but it's not that good. It's not good enough to warrant me saying it should get in. I don't really know what to add to what Dave just said, to be honest. I kind of feel much the same. This band, as we know, as we've discussed at the start of the first episode, are not unsung. Don't think this album deserves to go into discography, because I don't really feel particularly good about donating my time to a band this fucking big, who are only going to continue to get bigger probably as well. Depending, and they're legitimate as well. It's not like we're coming in here and saying, "Oh, by the way, the Kaiser Chiefs are actually really good," and like trying to. It's like everybody fucking likes the Arctic Monkeys. They're selling millions of records, and they are in a position where they are legitimate and allowed to put out a fucking David Bowie fucking concept Stanley Kubrick album. So it's not like they need our credibility either, let alone our
credibility.
Well, no, exactly. Like, if we might not be able to offer fans, but we can offer chin-strokey indie credibility.
West End points. I mean, it's a very small point. I actually, as we said about Tranquillity Base Hotel and Casino, I don't know if their fan base will continue to grow. I feel like they may have embarked down an avenue that is probably going to have diminishing returns, unless they pull back from it, which they might. I think they've gone too early into that sort of late period Manic Street Preachers, Flaming Lips, fucking like Q Mojo magazine rock. I don't think they're ready for that yet, but that's just my opinion.
Let me put it this way: with the exception of 2 songs on Purple Rain, this album
we had to wait.
We nearly
all
got
the way until the end for
this album. This album has more plays per song with the exception of 2 songs on Purple Rain.
Yeah, but how many fucking copies is it sold, Mark? That is like apples and oranges, man. That was released when people were buying like physical copies of things and listening to it on radio. That is just not the case anymore. Radio is Spotify now. How many fucking times has Prince been played in the radio? My God, man.
Probably now. Probably just. I bet Arctic Monkeys get paid quite a lot in radio now. Probably more than Prince does. But
not for the last.
We're talking about
years.
In terms of legacy plays. Then yeah, Mark's got a point.
I think these guys will have the same amount of legacy plays for sure. I don't think they'll go. I know
this album won't though. This album won't. None of the.
Yeah, but that's because it doesn't have any fucking singles on it.
That's my point about this album. Like, AM will definitely get massive legacy plays.
Yeah, sure.
This won't. Yeah, this was so key to
making
AM possible.
I mean, there must be an analogy here. Like, just because, say somebody fucking had an acid trip, right, and it made them really like see the universe in a different way, and then they came out and they started writing amazing fucking poetry or whatever. We should read the poetry and accept the poetry. We don't need to hear the guy talk about his fucking acid trip. So just because something is influential and important in somebody's development doesn't mean that we should give time to it. We should appreciate that it happened and then listen to the stuff that it's influenced.
I actually kind of enjoyed the acid trip more than the poetry, and I think that's kind of the point.
Well, I think on the whole, it was interesting to listen to this band for me, because I generally just, I wouldn't say dismissed them, but just blanked them.
Well, maybe I said in episode 1 about how a band just ends up being there, looming in pop culture, just like over everything, omnipresent. And as a result, like maybe people like us and people like our listeners, we tend to just sort of disregard them. We don't really engage with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of bands that I've disregarded because they're there and I just can't be bothered.
Yeah, you're like, they're overrepresented, I don't need to go there. And some of them actually do have some interesting stories, and I think this band and their development and some of their creative decisions and the risks that they took is actually kind of deserves some acknowledgement. I mean, they don't need our fucking pat in the back, they don't need our money, but they do deserve a bit of acknowledgement for being one of the few encouraging signs I see on the contemporary big stage, you know, as like, you know, setting a good example for young musicians, being like, if you want to do something that's a bit off-piste, then fucking just do it. You know, just try it.
Okay, so next week we're doing Radiohead's OK Computer. And then the week after we're doing the Beatles' White Album.
The Radiohead, the middle-class Arctic Monkeys.
I've got to say, by the way, I think that the fact that the last album wasn't a huge commercial success will eat away at Alex Turner. I think the next one will have big singles on it.
Maybe. Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah, that's a good point. He wants to
be... maybe Alex will have surrendered a little bit of his clout, and that the label officials will have a little bit more to go back to and be like, right, Dewey, this time...
Right, anyway, it's not up to us, it's up to you, the listener, to go and vote for this. Where can they vote for this, Mark?
Twitter.
Should go in or out? Is
Twitter,
it Twitter now?
Because Facebook is fucked again.
Oh, fuck's sake. Okay, so it's twitter.com/unsung.
MySpace. Yep. MySpace is where it's at, guys.
MySpace polls.
It's the vinyl of the internet.
It is.
Okay, what time is it? It's Nexus time.
A complicated series of connections between different things.
So that's what the actual time was like.
Genuinely confused.
It's like, you want to know the actual time? I'm not sure that's going to be of much relevance to the listeners, but okay.
So, it is Nexus time, and who are we getting to, and who chose it?
The Nexus target is the baby son from TV show Teletubbies, and that was chosen by our boy Craig.
Oi, Craig.
Probably as he was tripping his fucking balls off in a hospital ward.
Get well soon.
Massive LSD overdose. But yeah, so the baby son, Arctic Monkeys to that guy. Girl, actually, as it turns out.
As a girl, yeah.
So, I'm pretty proud of this Nexus, guys. Heads up. The Arctic Monkeys were supported at Brixton Academy by them Crooked Vultures. We mentioned that earlier on as a measure of just how fucking enormous they were as a band. Them Crooked Vultures features Josh Homme. It features John Paul Jones of a little band called Led Zeppelin, and it features a guy called Dave Grohl, who used to appear regularly in this Nexus until Mark fucking cancelled the shit out of him.
He's got vax, by the way, so he's obviously reformed.
Yeah. In January 2020, there was a thing called the Dime Bash in Santa Ana, California.
Oh, yeah.
It's in memory of Dimebag Darrell. Does that happen every year, I guess?
Yeah.
And Dave Grohl played with the members of Anthrax in something that became known as #Foothrax, which is just absolutely fucking humming. Anthrax took their name from a very potent toxin, as I'm sure we're all very well aware. That toxin, anthrax, almost played an enormous role in World War II. In 1942, Britain began work on Operation Vegetarian. You ever heard this?
No.
Amazing. Basically, they manufactured literally millions of little linseed animal feed cakes, little feed crackers, and the cakes were to be infected with anthrax, then rained down in Germany by British aircraft over livestock, so that the livestock would consume the cakes, become infected with anthrax. It would wipe out Germany's food supply, but also in the process infect and definitely kill millions of Germans. I mean, it was absolutely full-on biological warfare. Who knows where the fucking war might have gone from there. I know there's plenty of chat about chemical and biological weapons being considered en masse, but once someone fires the first shot, or once you break the seal, you know, preparations for Operation Vegetarian were actually completed in 1944, but clearly 1944 the war ended, and all evidence, or most evidence, was rapidly incinerated. But that could have been absolutely fucking horrendous.
That would have been, yeah.
Now, as part of the preparations for Operation Vegetarian, the British Army, under the auspices of a guy called Paul Filders, who, by the way, this guy also claims, later in life, he claimed that he modified a grenade with botulinum to kill Reinhard Heydrich, you know, the guy that was assassinated in Prague, who would probably have certainly maybe taken over from Hitler or been high up in the Nazi party. But Paul Filders was later awarded a medal after the war for his work, which I dare say might not have looked good in retrospect had Operation Vegetarian gone ahead. In the preparations for that, they took over an island called Greenard off the west coast of Scotland.
It's about 10 miles from Alipool.
Yeah, exactly, between Gairloch and Ullapool. The UK military, in its wisdom, decided Scotland was the perfect place to detonate an anthrax weapon. So a highly virulent strain of anthrax called Volum 14578 was placed atop a tower and detonated on the island. There's actually footage of this in existence that came out, and it shows this kind of weird brown aerosol drifting across the island, and then later clips of the footage show like the mass incineration of the dead livestock that was put there to test it. Dave, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Greenard Island was conspicuously removed from maps for many, many, many years at the orders of the British government. The story...
Well, it was left contaminated for so long.
Yep, absolutely. So the story has played a part in a lot of plot lines, everything from like Ian Rankin novels, Hawaii Five-0, episodes, through to graphic novels like Hellblazer. In one edition of Hellblazer, Greenard is an island of cannibal zombie children as a result of the testing that went on in it. Very interestingly, in 1981, this led to a thing called Operation Dark Harvest. Anyone ever heard of this?
Nope.
This is fucking incredible. So basically, this kind of, to this day, mysterious group of eco-protesters, Scottish eco-protesters, certainly protesting against the fact that England, British government, but England specifically, sought to use Scotland as a testing site. They landed on the island in secret with the help, apparently, of locals, and they smuggled 300 pounds of Greenard soil off the island. They then announced publicly their intention to deliver parcels of that soil around the UK. One of those parcels was actually sent to the Conservative Party conference in Blackpool, and another one, which tested positive for anthrax, was sent to the English military research base at Portendown, where the programme had originated.
Wow.
Fascinating story, honestly. And in 1986, kind of on the back of that, the Conservative government made a big show of trying to decontaminate the island, even declaring it clean in 1990. Although it's interesting to note that they sent a junior minister just in case. But that island was off maps and certainly was under some form of quarantine for the best part of 48 years. Incredible story, like amazing. I'd never heard of it. I was fascinated by it. As I mentioned, Ian Rankin incorporated the Greenard. Is it Greenard? Is that how it's pronounced?
Wait, I always knew it as Grunard. Just Grunard.
Right,
yeah.
Sorry, it's Gruinard. Apologies to the, what was it?
Chuchters.
It was 18 residents or something on it or something like that. Anyway, Ian Rankin incorporated it in his 2011 novel, The Impossible Dead. Ian Rankin, Scottish writer, quite famous. In 2019, he donated 50 boxes of documents, manuscripts and correspondence to the National Museum of Scotland, I think as he was moving flat. And that included correspondence with people as diverse as Ruth Rendell, Jilly Cooper, Val McDermid and J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling was the author of the Harry Potter books, including Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows, and conspiracy time. The Deathly Hallows, which in the book is a cloak, a stone, and a wand. Well, there's 3 icons, and those 3 icons put together form a symbol of like a circle divided by a line within a triangle, which, if you know the Teletubbies, is Dipsy, Tinky Winky, and Poe's little antenna. So the 3 Deathly Hallows logos are exactly 3 of the Teletubbies' little antenna shapes. And then the 4th one, which I'm sure you know is Lala, who has that weird yellow spiked twirly thing, really closely represents the lightning strike on Harry Potter's head.
Yeah.
So
it's incredible that basic shapes could be used into cultural phenomena.
So that's obviously led to loads of crossover fan bollocks online, conspiracy stuff, and clearly the baby son wakes up the Teletubbies each day, and also the baby son might be a demon, just adding that at the end in case any of you guys use that for yours, because it's a fascinating conspiracy theory in itself. If you pause Teletubbies, loads of online wackos think that the baby son transforms into a demon just as it comes over the hill. Bye.
Oh wow. Mark?
Cool. Yeah, okay, let's go for it. Josh Home's hands are all over this record. He did a story on bedtime stories with on CBeebies in 2017. Josh Homme famously hates the Teletubbies, like very famously hates them. But his segment aired just after an episode of Teletubbies on that very same day. So there you go.
You realise, Mark, that Alex Turner did one of those as well. So you actually got there in less steps.
I didn't know that. I googled that and I couldn't find anything. How did it? Yeah, shit, man. Fuck.
I've also got a wee quick one, but in 2006, then Chancellor, future Prime Minister Gordon Brown, said that he was a fan of the Arctic Monkeys, but then was questioned, what's your favourite song? And he could not name a song. He then later admitted that he actually liked Coldplay.
Of course.
Gordon Brown, he was followed as Prime Minister by famous Smiths fan David Cameron. David Cameron in...
What do you mean, Charmless Man?
Oh yes, that's very satire. Very good. In 2011, David Cameron was on the One Show, the BBC After News sort of magazine show, and host Matt Baker, who used to be on Blue Peter, asked him, how on earth do you sleep at night? Don't know if you remember that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, which was like amazing, and everybody sort of came out and said, holy shit, Matt Baker just and David Cameron just went, so it's never actually been confirmed if he was like, how do you sleep at night being a Tory cunt, or how do you sleep at night being a stressed man, or whatever.
He was definitely doing the former. Like it was, yeah.
And anyway, Matt Baker in 2017 interviewed the actors Dipsy and Lala, and it was for a big Teletubby reappearance. And Matt Baker, Holly Willoughby, Lorraine Kelly, just everybody, they did the whole fucking media whirligig. But the Sun was nowhere to be there, because the Sun, they're not even sure who it is.
No, there's
played by Jess Smith in the original series and Berry, surname unknown, in the revival series.
Yeah, there's a photo of the girl that was the original Sun. She's like obviously all grown up now, and it's quite entertaining. And then
it's probably just somebody on the production team's baby, then they've just got, all right, we need a baby. Oh, I
actually think I was reading about it a little bit. I could be totally wrong here, but I think her mum might have been a costume designer for Teletubbies.
No, that makes sense. Anyway, that's Arctic Monkeys to Teletubbies. Great. All right, what we doing next week?
I don't know. Tell us.
Oh, it's my shout, isn't it? Yeah, next week I'm doing something that I wanted to do for ages. Could do a musician called Arthur Russell, and the album we're going to do is actually called Calling Out of Context, and it was released, it's a compilation album released 12 years after his death, so I believe this is the first sort of compilation greatest hits record that we're doing. But a big part of why we're doing that will be talking about his career and the fact that very varied, but also, and he doesn't really have a defining album from his lifetime, but he's got a fucking vast array of incredible music. So looking forward to that. Who are we connecting him to? Who's the Nexus?
Oh, back to me doing it, seeing as you guys aren't here. Jesus. Sucks.
Okay.
As ever, if you have any suggestions, please drop them via comment on any social media platform you can imagine, apart from TikTok.
We just have to connect whatever artist we are doing to any character, real or mystical, that you can think of, and we'll try our best to make it interesting and or short and or involve Nazis.
Well, we're nexusing to two people, sort of, Chaz and Dave.
Oh, right, okay.
That's courtesy of Johnny K. Shiv on Instagram.
All right, yeah, that's a good one. We'll try that.
Cool.
All right, troops. Well, I might go listen to
everyone else.
Nirvana or Queens of Stone Age now.
Bye.
Bye.